Hi, and welcome to another episode of Punk Rock Politics with John Smith. Obviously, I'm John Smith. I want to thank Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report for inspiration and for this video that I've been putting off for weeks that has stopped the constant inundation of news coming into all of our screens online and in the mainstream media, and a lot of it's relevant regardless of the source, but you have to read between the lines, and I'm trying to give you stuff that corporate media and mainstream media is not giving you or not covering enough or fairly or objectively or doing enough investigation on. And Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report does a great job, and I watched this weeks ago, and I've been really stunned by how Bernie Sanders suspended his campaign and how he endorsed Biden so quickly and how he didn't fight harder for the first coronavirus response and played party politics and went after Republicans but didn't admit that $4.25 trillion was being printed from the Fed and charged to the taxpayers and given to large corporations of over 500 employees, and that they had like no strings attached. They pretended like it was a big deal that there's a 5-person committee with no subpoena power who is supposed to regulate and monitor them after the money is being spent. But small and medium businesses with 499 or less employees, apparently, have to keep on employees and have prior employees and keep them on during the coronavirus in order to get forgiveness on their loans. They gave way more money to corporations and way less to small, medium businesses, and their plan, as Jimmy Dore and others have pointed out, and many investigative journalists, is to buy up all the failing small and medium businesses. So this affects the vast majority of the country. It definitely affects the 99%, or at least the 90%. So check it out. Look at Peasant or Else. This is episode 237. This is a nice lengthy video from, again, Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report. One of the guys that I've followed for many, many years, who's gotten me to decide to finally take the hard work it takes and do this. So, Punk Rock Politics New Edition. I'm going to play Mike Figueredo as long as I can, and then I'm going to give a critique. And, yeah, check it out. This is me responding to Bernie Sanders' many poor decisions in how he suspended his campaign and how he endorsed Biden and why he endorsed Biden so soon, etc. So look at Peasant or Else. Biden's Boot. Episode 237 from April 17th, 2020.
Enjoy the program. Let's get right to it.
That would have been great, except it's not linked to my TV, so excuse me one sec. Here we go. I skipped this intro. Check it out later.
We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and we have a president who is holding... We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and we have a president who is holding daily news briefings for COVID-19, and this is...
Thanks for sticking with me. Unlike these guys who have many subscribers and get paid for this, I'm working my way up to get enough subscribers on YouTube and to get patrons on Patreon, so I can pay for YouTube commercials and never get them and have to edit them and get editing software that works, and I can combine videos and do all the things I need to do. But without further ado, let's get into all the problems Bernie Sanders makes, what some of Trump's mistakes with COVID-19, etc., and here we go. Hopefully this syncs up better.
This is the Humanist Report with Mike Figueredo. The Humanist Report podcast is funded by viewers like you through Patreon and PayPal. To support the show, visit patreon.com/Humanist Report or become a member at humanistreport.com. Now, enjoy the show.
Yeah, that's a cool little intro.
We'll close the show by talking to Professor Harvey J. Kaye, who talks about his latest book, FDR on Democracy, the greatest speeches and writings of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's what we've got on the agenda for today's episode. Hopefully you all will enjoy the program. Let's get right to it.
Mike, it's Delano.
We're in the middle of a global pandemic, and we have a president who is holding daily news briefings for COVID-19, and this is exactly what we should expect from a leader, except instead of actually reassuring people that everything is going to be okay, he's basically going on television every single day and throwing temper tantrums and shitting himself. This is what we're dealing with. Now, I will admit that the strategy of holding these daily press briefings, it's not just what leaders should do, but politically speaking, this is beneficial to Donald Trump theoretically, because Joe Biden has basically been invisible throughout this COVID-19 crisis, hence why a lot of Democrats are kind of gravitating towards Andrew Cuomo, mistakenly so, but nonetheless, that's what's happening right now because they're desperate for a leader. So for Donald Trump to just be visible in and of itself, I think there is some value in terms of helping him with his re-election chances, because if voters value anything in a leader, it's strength, it's leadership. And that's the bare minimum. But as we've seen with Donald Trump, he can't even do the bare minimum for too long before he starts having meltdowns. Because he literally can't even bother to seem somewhat competent. He can't pretend long enough until he's off air. And Donald Trump has been doing so little to assure people that he has this under control that his overall approval rating has actually gone down throughout the course of these daily press briefings. And this comes after a majority of Americans supported his response initially. And let me remind you that Donald Trump's approval rating should have been at 0%. The fact that a majority of Americans initially approved of his handling of COVID shows how much the media failed. Because he is the reason why this is so bad in the United States. He ignored repeated warnings time and again. So if we acted sooner, it's unquestionable, we would be better off. We wouldn't have been able to, skirt this pandemic altogether. It was something that we were going to have to deal with, but it's not even arguable. He put us in a worse off predicament. So the fact that a majority of voters approved of his job was awful. It speaks to the failure of the media, but it's also embarrassing as an American because, come on. But the fact that he took a majority approval and tanked it, it speaks to how stupid this individual is. And part of it is that he cares so little about Americans that he can't even really hide the fact that he doesn't care at all if they die. And he was talking about reopening the country by Easter until smart people around him had to let him know that would be a terrible decision. And as Mary Poppinfuss of HuffPost reports, in his haste to jumpstart the economy, Trump posed a frightening scenario to Dr. Anthony Fauci during a task force meeting in the Situation Room. No COVID-19 countermeasures would be taken so that people would quickly become infected, with some recovering to create a protective herd immunity, sources told the newspaper. Quote, "Why don't we let this wash over the country?" Trump asked, a question others told the Post the president has raised repeatedly in the Oval Office. Fauci, the head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, realized with surprise that Trump was serious, the Post reported. "Mr. President," Fauci responded, according to the Post, "many people would die." Now, the fact that this even had to be explained to the President of the United States is utterly absurd. Like, he genuinely believed for a period of time, maybe he still believes this, that we actually could choose between killing off Americans and the economy, as if lots and lots of people dying in and of itself wasn't going to be bad for the economy if you just let this disease wash over America. So the fact that this had to be explained to him shows you what a fucking moron this person is. But thankfully, there are people in his ear, for now anyways, like Dr. Fauci, who are actually smart. And the reason why I say for now is because in an interview with Jake Tapper on CNN, Dr. Fauci admitted what was obvious to everyone. Of course, if we acted sooner, we would have been better off, which led to Donald Trump retweeting a chud who called on Dr. Fauci to be fired for daring to suggest that Daddy Trump could ever be wrong in any circumstance ever. And make no mistake about it, what Trump is doing here is kind of firing off a warning shot to Dr. Fauci. Fall in line, obey me, or you're gone. Now, Trump knows that politically, this isn't going to help his case going into November, because Dr. Fauci is one of the most trusted entities in American government currently. So if Donald Trump were to fire him, this wouldn't bode well for his electoral chances. So Donald Trump is probably having an internal battle right now. On one hand, he wants complete and total obedience because he is an authoritarian. But on another hand, he knows that he kind of has to play nicely with Dr. Fauci currently if he wants to reassure the American people that he's competent and he should be reelected. And it kind of seems like after today, he is siding with his inner authoritarian. Because there is a battle that's going on currently between governors and Donald Trump's administration. You see kind of a pact forming along the West Coast and some other states, and they're basically saying we're going to be the ones who dictate when we reopen our states back up. And Trump wants to reopen sooner rather than later because, of course, he's self-interested and he thinks that the economy tanking is something that is going to hurt him. So if we reopen the economy, just push everyone back out into the workplace, get them all sick sooner, it's better for him. So if state governors are going to, defy him, then he's not just going to stand idly by. So it's kind of mask off, and he's just going full authoritarian. Case in point.
When somebody's the president of the United States, the authority is total. And that's the way it's got to be.
The authority is total.
It's total. And the governors know that.
So if
The governors know that. No, you have a couple of bands of excuse me. You have a couple.
Could you rescind that order?
You have a couple of bands of Democrat governors, but they will agree to it.
Democratic
They will agree to
governors.
it. But
Jerk
the
off.
authority of the president of the United States having to do with the subject we're talking about is total.
The sitting United States president just said the president's authority is total. Wow. I think that it's pretty smart for governors to go back and forth with Donald Trump here because they know that Donald Trump is unhinged and he's going to battle them. And whenever he battles them, this helps raise their profile. Like Gretchen Whitmer has benefited a lot from Donald Trump attacking her. And she's believed to be a potential VP pick for Joe Biden. So they know that battling Donald Trump is it helps them politically, at least in terms of throwing red meat to your own base of Democratic Party voters. So, admittedly, this is a fuck you to Donald Trump when he says we're going to reopen. For them to say, no, we're not. I think this is kind of a good move for them. It shows strength. It shows leadership where we get none federally. At least we get it at the state level in some states. But here's the thing. If Donald Trump says we're going to reopen the country back up, whatever that means in whatever capacity he's thinking he has the authority to command them to do, what if they just say no? Like, what is he going to do? What are you going to do, Trump? Are you going to send in the military to force them to reopen the state? Like, what does that even look like? Like, what authority does Donald Trump think he has here? You have federal recommendations, from the CDC and whatnot, but at the end of the day, governors are the ones who get to dictate when states reopen. And you have the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, aligning with some East Coast states, and they're saying, actually, we're going to choose when it's best for our states, each with our own unique internal battles with COVID-19, and fuck you. Now, somebody asked him a follow-up question about what he meant by that and how it's obviously not true, and he just kind of had a temper tantrum and melted down.
You said when someone is president of the United States, their authority is total. That is not true.
Okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to write up papers on this. It's not going to be necessary because the governors need us one way or the other because ultimately it comes with the federal government. That being said, we're getting along very well with the governors, and I feel very certain that there won't be a problem. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Has any governor agreed that you have the authority to decide when their state
I haven't
is
asked
back up?
anybody because I don't, you know why? Because I don't have to. Go ahead, please.
But who's
What a
thinking
jerk.
the president has the total authority?
Enough. Please.
Enough.
You mentioned the vice.
Now, if you notice, he's kind of backtracking a little bit. In that first video, towards
That's
the
their-
end, he said,
that's their job.
the president has
Enough.
total authority when it comes to this issue. Not true. And here, he says, he kind of softens it a little bit. Actually, these governors, they need the federal government when it comes to funding and supplies. So, yeah, that's what I meant. I didn't mean that I was going to be like this petulant authoritarian and force them to reopen their states, even if they think that that would be unsafe. Well, that's exactly what it meant. And because you know that you don't have the power, short of some type of weird, unconstitutional power grab, he has no choice but to back down. Because this is a battle that he can't win, because he doesn't have the authority to command states to do that. They're saying no, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You can't do shit. You can't force governors to be complicit if you command them to reopen their states and kill people. But the mere fact that he would even suggest that the president has total authority and use that authoritarian language, that should worry everyone. That should tell you that Donald Trump doesn't actually care about checks and balances. He literally does not believe that there is any check on his authority, even if he is actually saying it's only with regard to this issue. It's in a limited scope that I have total authority. I don't believe that he believes that, but even if he thought that in a limited scope he had total authority. That's not something that you say. As a leader, you say, what I'm doing is I'm working with the experts, and together we're formulating a response. We're formulating a plan to reopen the country. But he can't even do that because he can't help himself. Instinctively, he is an authoritarian to his core. He is an authoritarian. And each successive president has increased the power of the executive branch. George Bush did this a lot. We saw a substantial increase in executive power under his administration. We saw another increase under Obama, and we're seeing it again with Donald Trump. And this is going to be a trend that continues until we finally get someone in power who's not self-interested, who limits the scope, and Congress actually stands up and does its job, and the courts do its job. But as you can see,
Bernie Sanders.
what we have are institutions that just
So an option.
have completely caved to the executive. So there is really no check on authority. He doesn't have the constitutional ability to be able to have total authority over anything. But the fact that he thinks he does, that should worry everyone. So let me just say that we are so, and I cannot emphasize this enough, but
Don't worry, he's going to get in the Sanders word.
well, I think that we all knew this was coming. It was inevitable since the beginning. Bernie Sanders has said that he intended on supporting whoever the Democratic Party's nominee was. If that wasn't him, then he'd, enthusiastically back that individual. And here we are. Now, what does surprise me is how quickly he's endorsing Joe Biden. I don't think this is a smart decision, even if I knew he was going to endorse Joe Biden. If I were part of Bernie's team advising him, I would have instructed him to wait, because I think that would be a way for you to extract more concessions from Joe Biden. Nonetheless, Bernie Sanders endorsed Joe Biden in a live stream that was pretty awkward. Take a look.
So today I am asking all Americans, I'm asking every Democrat, I'm asking every independent, I'm asking a lot of Republicans to come together in this campaign to support your candidacy, which I endorse, to make certain that we defeat somebody who I believe, and I'm speaking just for myself now, is the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. A president, and you made this point, who downplayed this pandemic, who ignored the advice that some of his people were giving him, who has not used the Defense Production Act early on so that we could produce the masks, the gowns, the gloves, the ventilators that our medical personnel desperately need, who today, because I understand that is threatening to fire Dr. Fauci, who has been unbelievable. I mean, who has been day after day the voice of science to the American people, trying to explain how we go forward in this crisis, and he's threatening to fire him. So to me, for all of those reasons and so many more, a president who apparently has never read the Constitution of the United States, who believes he's above the law, a president who lies all of the time, a president who has at least shown me that he is a racist and a sexist and a homophobe and a xenophobe and a religious bigot. I mean, for all of those reasons or more, we've got to make Trump a one-term president, and we need you in the White House. So I will do all that I can to see that happens, Joe. And I know that there is an enormous responsibility on your shoulders right now. And it's imperative that all of us work together to do what has to be done, not only in this moment, but beyond this moment, in the future of this country. And in that regard, I have been very pleased that your staff and my staff have been working together over the last several weeks to coming up with a number of task forces. These are task forces that will look at some of the most important issues facing this country.
We already know the answers.
The economy, how we create an economy that works for all, not just a few. Education, how we create the best educational system in the world for all of our people. How we deal with climate change, which, as you indicated, is an existential threat to the planet. How we deal with criminal justice, because we don't want to continue having more people in jail than any other country on earth, how we deal with immigration reform, and how we have a healthcare system that is so much better than what we have right now. Now, it's no great secret out there, Joe, that you and I have our differences. And we're not going to paper them over, that's real. But I hope that these task forces will come together, utilizing the best minds and people in your campaign and in my campaign to work out real solutions to these very, very important problems. So look forward to working with you and bringing some great people into those task forces.
That was hard to watch. I'm not gonna lie, that was hard to watch.
I'm going to jump in here because I'm going to critique a lot of what he said, and I was taking notes, but hard to watch is an understatement. But notice when Bernie Sanders is softer on Medicare for All and says, well, we need a better healthcare system than we have. He doesn't say a for-profit system. He doesn't say we need to get rid of a for-profit system and insurance companies and prescription drug companies funding campaigns, because that's where Biden gets a lot of his money from. He just says we have to have a better healthcare system than we have. So Bernie right there is letting down his supporters and backing down on Medicare for All, which is what tanked Elizabeth Warren's campaign. And Bernie has done videos on why we need Medicare for All simultaneously, but this endorsement came way too soon. And Bernie got very little concessions from Joe Biden, meaning the majority of voters got very few concessions from the corrupt Democratic Party that rigged this primary for Joe Biden, who is now the elites are even saying we need to get rid of or replace. Well, Bernie Sanders got the next amount of votes. That's the most Democratic thing. So although I don't agree with this Tara Reade accusation is tearing apart Joe Biden, his record is atrocious. He's a liar. He's who got us Trump, him and Barack Obama. 2008 and 2012, they had 8 years, and they gave 91% of the bailouts from the 2008 financial crisis to the top 1%. So, and they put nobody in Wall Street in jail except a 28-year-old mid-level executive, I had to do both, holding my phone here, who probably had no idea what was going on, or certainly wasn't the leader of this. The governor of my state, Murphy, who they decided to heavily endorse in every county in New Jersey, their Democratic establishment endorsed before they even had the primary fight. Phil Murphy, although has acted fairly progressive on certain issues but not progressive enough, and has definitely bungled the coronavirus response, Phil Murphy was one of the orchestrators of the financial collapse. The governor of New Jersey. Check it out. Look it up. All right, let's continue with Mike Figueredo's response, so I have enough time to critique it. I took a lot of notes, but I wanted to jump in on it makes no objective sense why Bernie Sanders would so early endorse Joe Biden. He's already backing down on Medicare for All in this video. And Jamie Dore did a few pieces even before this about how Bernie Sanders was backing down on Medicare for All while Trump was outlifting the Democratic establishment, especially Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Well, let's continue, and we will go forward. And he gets more into Sanders, and I'm going to critique some stuff about Sanders and some of the beginning about Trump after he is done talking.
Because he just dropped out. Like, that pain is still there. The pain is real, and I'm not ready to see him do that, but here we are. And for those of you wondering, that was one of Bernie Sanders' most disliked videos. He rarely gets ratioed on his videos, but his supporters clearly aren't feeling it. And to his last point there, I'm sorry.
Clearly aren't feeling it. 1.5 thousand up likes and 2.8 thousand dislikes. Bernie Sanders usually gets a ton of likes and barely any dislikes. He's a low amount of views and mostly negative. Almost double of his positive likes. He got more dislikes, almost double. 2.8 thousand dislikes and only 1.5 thousand likes. The guy gets way more views on some of these videos. Soon enough, my videos will get more views covering his story. Anyway, let's continue.
I'll pass on the technocratic task force. I don't know what that's going to accomplish other than placating progressives. Like, we already know what needs to be done with regard to healthcare and criminal justice reform and education. I don't need a task force to come up with more solutions. We have the solutions. The question is, will we ever get someone in power who's actually going to carry out the solutions that we need? So I have no interest in the task force. And a lot of people are enthusiastically following Bernie Sanders' lead and endorsing Joe Biden, but one of them is someone who I really respect. Brianna Joy Gray, who was his press spokesperson, she tweeted out, with the utmost respect for Bernie Sanders, who is an incredible human being and a genuine inspiration, I don't endorse Joe Biden. I supported Bernie Sanders because he backed ideas like Medicare for All, canceling all student debt, and a wealth tax. Biden supports none of those. And that's exactly it. I will say that I really respect her for saying this because she knows that she's going to be attacked by Biden bros for saying this, because it is heresy if you don't fall in line immediately and support Joe Biden enthusiastically. Lick that boot. And she's not doing that. So kudos to her for actually having a brain of her own and not just doing exactly what the establishment commands of you. So let me explain why I think this is a bad idea on Bernie's part. I know he was going to endorse Joe Biden, but to endorse him this early when you've extracted precisely 0 policy concessions from him is completely it's strategically not savvy. I'll put it that way to be polite. Doing this, it benefits you in no way at all. It benefits the movement in no way at all. If I were Bernie Sanders, I'm playing hardball. I'm holding out. I'm not making an endorsement until I get at least one firm policy concession from Joe Biden, along with the promise that he will appoint someone to his administration that is actually going to hold his feet to the fire with said policy concession. But Bernie Sanders got nothing, and he endorsed him. I mean, over the weekend, Joe Biden has proposed Medicare at 60 and canceling some student debt, although when you look into it, it looks more like a more charitable loan repayment program. I mean, you got nothing, and you endorsed him already. What's the point? Like, why? What's the point? You're gaining nothing. Like, we know that when Amy Klobuchar and Pete Buttigieg dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden immediately, there was something in it for them. Whether that is a spot in his administration, an endorsement from Obama or Biden for another office, maybe Pete Buttigieg wants to run for governor, I don't know. But I know damn well that they wouldn't have endorsed Joe Biden and dropped out to endorse him if they weren't going to get anything. So I don't understand why Bernie Sanders would do this so quickly, because you're basically taking all of your leverage and you're throwing it away, just like that. It makes no sense. Bernie Sanders isn't good at playing politics. That is what I learned over the course of these last couple of months. But at the same time, it's part of the reason why I love him so much, because I don't want someone to be so calculative. I don't want someone who's going to play politics and do things for purposes of political expediency. But at the same time, on the same coin but opposite side, I want him to try to do what he can for the movement. And admittedly, that does mean once in a while you've got to play politics, right? Be authentic when it comes to policies. But when it comes to fighting the establishment, and this is a real fight. I emphasize the word fight because that's what this is. This is intra-party warfare. You've got to play a little bit of politics, at least a little bit. And the fact that he chose to endorse Joe Biden while getting nothing, it's really frustrating, because back in 2016, Bernie Sanders didn't endorse Hillary Clinton until like June or July, and immediately she came out with one of his policies. Now, it was watered down, right? It was free college. I don't remember specifically what it was. I think maybe it was means tested. And we all know that she didn't actually support it. She was just paying lip service and trying to placate progressives. But nonetheless, he tried to get what he could. And on top of that, he had some say with the platform. But I mean, here you endorse Joe Biden, and when it comes to healthcare, he proposed Medicare at 60. Bernie, your supporters are very, very young. So how does it benefit you to immediately concede and endorse him when he isn't offering your supporters specifically anything? I mean, this is when we need to learn how to get a little bit more savvy as progressives and as leftists, and to acknowledge that as leftists, we will basically be perpetually marginalized when it comes to the establishment. But what little power we have, we've got to understand that there is an effective and practical way to harness that power. And just immediately conceding and endorsing Joe Biden like this, I don't think that's a good way to use the power that you have to get any change whatsoever. Now, a lot of stuff is happening behind the scenes, I'm sure, So I don't know the conversations that Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden had, but what I do know is that just looking at this as an outsider, to me, it looks like Bernie Sanders just kind of rolled over and died. And I get it, he's fought for so long, he doesn't want to do it anymore. He's a nice guy, he's ready to move on with his life. But if, actually fighting for real change, and not just that, but helping to get Joe Biden to a point where he's actually more electable and there's maybe a little bit of enthusiasm among young people, you needed to keep pushing. But I mean, the entire media narrative was drop out, drop out, drop out, drop out, drop out. And once he dropped out, it was endorse Biden, endorse Biden, endorse Biden. He went on Stephen Colbert, and I think that was the first thing he asked them, or I don't know if it was the first thing, but it came up. So it's tiring. I get that it's exhausting to have them constantly hound you. But I mean, we believed in you to be the leader, and I kind of feel let down here, I'm not gonna lie. So, it's not like I'm surprised this was inevitable, but it still sucks to see it, it hurts to see it. And Bernie Sanders, this should be it should serve as a reminder that if you are a lefty and you're getting involved, don't play politics until you need to, right? Don't play politics with voters, play politics with the establishment. Bernie just never learned that. And because of it, I think we will get zero policy concessions. And I'm not delusional enough to think that Joe Biden would even follow through with anything he proposed us, but I mean, you do what you can in the position with the cards that you're dealt, and I think Bernie Sanders played his hand poorly here.
Let's do a quick recap of the beginning of this video, even though we were getting into a little bit of Bernie Sanders. In fact, you know what? I'm going to jump into the Bernie Sanders critique, and then go backwards and talk about the beginning of the video, and then we're going to continue with Mike Figueredo, and I'm going to give some more, analysis and my view on these things. So he's saying that Sanders was so quickly endorsing Biden so soon. This is what Mike Figueredo from the show we're watching from Humanist Report was saying. He should have waited longer to get concessions from Biden. This is me saying this. A political revolution, given that Sanders was leading on coronavirus and is the most popular politician in the country, and Biden's dementia and being hidden by the media and the rigged primary, and I mean the list goes on and on. His atrocious record, his lies, the increasing evidence against the Tara Reade accusation of sexual assault against Joe Biden, which prior to Bernie Sanders dropping out was ignored by the mainstream media. I found the endorsement to be disgusting by Sanders. That's not a political revolution. There's a lot of notes here, so just bear with me a second. As Mike pointed out, when I heard it, it was he's like, when Bernie Sanders we're going to establish task forces to decide history, economics, common sense, and real information and investigative journalism have already decided what we need. We need Medicare for all. We need a Green New Deal to save the planet. We need Medicare for all to cut costs and to save more people's lives and give more people, healthcare equality. To give all people the same stuff and have better access, not to just give rich people and politicians, essentially Medicare for all, and the rest of us can, chuck rocks and go into debt. 500,000 Americans a year go into debt in the richest country in the world, medical debt. Many people die from preventable diseases because they're not sure if their insurance will cover it, or they can't afford their premiums, even if they get their thing through work, or if they lose their job like the coronavirus, they have no insurance. And you have to wait while you could die and people suffer while this thing spreads to see what the politicians eventually do, which is still subpar at the federal level from both the leaders in the Democratic and Republican parties. So, like he said, Mike Figueredo said, progressives know what we need. The question is, will we get a person in power to do the right thing? Absolutely. Like a Bernie Sanders, who could still be voted for, and we should discuss getting rid of Biden and taking the person with the next most votes. Anything else would be anti-democratic. And elitist Democrats are acting like Sanders can't still win, and New York and lovely Andrew Cuomo and all those fun guys are taking Bernie and their Democratic Party in the state is taking Bernie Sanders off the ballot, which we'll get into later in another video. It hurts the movement until you get at least one big policy concession and someone in the administration to make sure you could hold their feet to the fire. Sanders gained nothing, which is absolutely true. Mike's right. I can't read my own goddamn handwriting. Klobuchar and Buttigieg got something. If you bet their butt when they were doing, especially Buttigieg, to drop his campaign when he had the support he did and endorsed Biden, he's getting something. Like he said, different endorsements from Biden or Obama for different offices or position in the administration. Bernie threw it away. Sanders was bad at playing politics. And that's why Mike Figueredo of the Humanist Report, this guy, is saying, that's one of the reasons you like him is he's not calculative. He's genuine, and that's why most people like him, even the people that don't agree with his policies, but believe he's honest and fights for what he means and believes in these things. And I believe in them, and I agree with them, and history has proven them, and economics have proven them to make the most sense efficiently and to give the most people the most benefit for the least amount of money, save money for taxpayers, and do the right thing. So it's been proven throughout history and economics. But he's saying this is no joke. This is intra-party warfare. Sometimes you got to play a little politics. He's absolutely right. Mike's right. Bernie, didn't endorse Hillary until June or July of 2016. And he got a say on the platform in HRC, or Hillary Rodham Clinton or HRC. Gave him a watered-down thing, but they got more out of Hillary. And he endorsed Biden way sooner, and all they did was move the Medicare from, 65 to 60? Or something, or 60 to 55. Nothing for the supporters, the major supporters, and the majority of supporters of Bernie Sanders, who are all ages, but especially 45 and under, the highest majority, and many even 55 and under, and some 65. People all over the spectrum, but they gave nothing for the majority of his voters. He said there could be things happening. Mike Figueroa said there could be things happening behind the scenes, but we believed in you to be a leader. And he feels betrayed, Mike Figueredo, and so do I. He doesn't play politics. He's saying that lefties, progressives, shouldn't play politics with voters, but they should play politics with, those in power, with the establishment. And he's absolutely right. Just to recap, it's a long video. It's important. Mike is absolutely correct. You don't play politics with your voters, but you do play politics with the people of power that are playing politics with you, controlling the media, bashing you endlessly, way more than anybody else, lying about you constantly, and stealing the election. Look at the exit polls. There's one company that does exit polls. This election was stolen by the DNC and Biden, who clearly had no chance to beat Bernie Sanders. Bernie just, look at all the polls for months before that. Biden was supposed to get 8% in Massachusetts. You're telling me he won? Well, guess what? He got 65,000 points above the exit polls, and Bloomberg got more votes in the exit polls, and Bernie Sanders got 47,000 less in the exit polls in just Massachusetts alone, and Warren got 50,000 less in her state where she's very popular and was, and still is, a senator. And Bernie was beating her by about 23%. She had 20%. Biden had 8%. Supposedly we're supposed to believe he crushed them both. Unbelievable. With proof that it was rigged. Over 2% of exit polls, if you're off, our own CIA says we overthrow countries for that. But constantly Bernie was 3.8 or 2.8 below, and it always benefited all the establishment candidates. And Bernie Sanders always went down from the exit polls, and all the other people went up. Look it up. Buttigieg had 12%, which is insane. In, I believe it was New Hampshire. And he, one of Buttigieg's ridiculous connections had something to do with the bundling of the Iowa caucus, and it was all to benefit Buttigieg. And the media went on a blitz trying to say that he won the first 2 primaries, and every president in history except one that won the first 2 primaries became president. He won the first 3, and they were all the mainstream media was saying, "Oh, look, if you win Nevada, that's a demographic for the whole country." He wins that, and then all of a sudden, Joe Biden wins his first presidential campaign in history after running 5 campaigns and leaving in shame for president. And he wins South Carolina because a bunch of corporate elitist endorsements that nobody cares about. And supposedly everybody voted for Biden, and he just swept the country with no infrastructure, never stepped foot in Massachusetts or Maine. He supposedly crushed these progressive states. It's nonsense. Use your common sense. Plus, there's evidence to back up what I'm saying and prove it. Bernie just never learned that because of that. He played politics with the establishment. And he played politics with his voters by distorting it to some degree, and then played too much politics with the establishment when he should have been more fervent and gained more out of them. But Bernie just learned that and he's saying, Figueredo saying the progressives will get 0 policy concessions, and Mike Figueredo he's not delusional. He's saying enough to believe that Joe Biden would follow through on anything he proposes or claims that he will endorse. and Sanders played his cards wrong, and that's just an absolutely great assessment by Mike Figueredo. There's plenty of stuff about Trump that's very important that I'm going to speed through really quickly. Is the fact that Trump had originally a positive response for his daily briefings and then bungled that is funny. The Democrats are mistakenly, as Mike Figueredo says, thinking of Cuomo to replace Biden. I did a 4-part series about why that is a disaster, and Andrew Cuomo is the worst. Check it out on Punk Rock Politics, baby. And subscribe. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and go to patreon.com/punkrockpolitics. Become a patron today. Membership starts for a little $1 a month. Support Punk Rock Politics. Help me grow the channel and help me get better technology and provide you more videos, more in-depth analysis, more investigative journalism, more editing tools, and just everything to give you a better experience. Have more people on the show, have guests, all that stuff. Trump's approval rating went down during these briefings, which is still, again, funny. And it shows the failure of the media that these people ever supported him in the first place. And, it shows their lack of hitting governors, Congress, the RNC, the DNC, and leaders in both parties in the power structure. That's coming from me. It's my comment. Trump doesn't care if Americans die. Trump was in a meeting with Fauci, and he said we need to get people infected to create an immunity. Fauci was surprised that Trump was serious and said many people would die. Figueredo was like, you shouldn't have to tell a leader that. And he's saying, choosing to kill, Trump wanted to kill thousands to open the economy or more, and ignoring the economic costs of killing all those people who do different jobs and contribute to our economy. Absolutely asinine, anti-economic, it's immoral, it's ridiculous. And Fauci said the obvious thing, like Figueredo said, that if we acted sooner, we could have, beat this off. And Trump didn't like it, and he tweeted out and started to put out warning shots to Fauci, like he was going to fire him, but he can't because he's too popular. Fauci's one of the most trusted people in the government right now. And Bernie Sanders alluded to this too in his speech later, and Figueredo was talking about it in the beginning. It ties back in, and it's horrible. He wants to get rid of Fauci, but Trump knows it would look bad to fire him, so he's trying to get some obedience out of him. But he's siding with his authoritarian side. He's telling governors that, the governors are telling Trump that we decide when we open the economy, not you. And Trump goes full authoritarian and says the president has full authority to do whatever he wants and reopen the economy nationally. So Trump doesn't have the authority to demand governors to open. And, him even saying that authoritarian thing means that Trump, doesn't believe in checks and balances in the Constitution of the United States of America at any level, and the Bill of Rights that protect us from these breaches of power and give us the different branches to give us, we should definitely reform things in the Congress and Senate and open up more parties to vote and have maybe ranked choice voting and definitely have open primaries and not have to register to a party to vote for anybody. We need more democracy. But what Trump's saying is regression. Let's continue watching what Mike Figueredo says, and I'll critique as much as I can before this video runs out. All right. To be more clear, what Trump is saying is absolutely ridiculous, anti-democratic, anti-logical, authoritarian, dictatorial-like, and we need to stop it and condemn it. He does not have full authority. Now let's finish the rest of this, and I will comment as much as I can, and hopefully not have to cut off Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report.
Last week, after Bernie Sanders dropped out, Joe Biden tried to extend an olive branch to Bernie Sanders supporters via Twitter by telling all of us that he sees us, he hears us, and he knows that he's got to earn your vote. So, in other words, he seemed, like he knew at least that he had to try to unify the party. That lasted about a week, and now here's what he's saying. He is offering anyone this amazing sticker if you choose to send him your hard-earned cash. It says, I'm a Democrat and proud of it. And as you can see, it crosses out socialist and plutocrat. Because, socialism and plutocracy, these things go hand in hand. I guess that's what he's trying to communicate. I don't know. Listen, they know exactly what they're doing. They can't feign ignorance. His team knows what they're doing. This is a slap in the face to Bernie Sanders and all of his supporters. So that appeal to Bernie supporters lasted about a week, and he's already telling you to go fuck yourself. This is my question. I genuinely am asking. I'm not trying to be pretentious or patronizing. I genuinely am asking a question to people who are vote blue no matter who. At what point do we start pressuring Joe Biden and the Biden bros to try to make even just a little bit of an effort to win over the left? At what point do we start putting pressure on Biden? Because what I've seen from a lot of people on Twitter, Mehdi Hassan, others, is that if you are even considering not falling in line and supporting Joe Biden, you are a terrible, terrible human being, and you must want Donald Trump to win. If you're going to stay home, you're a bad person. If you are going to vote third party, you're a terrible person. So my question to those people who believe that, and I get the legitimate fear about Trump getting reelected. All of the left does. But my question is, at what point do you actually direct your focus to Joe Biden? Does he share any responsibility at all, even a little bit, to try to win over the left? At what point does it become the Democratic Party's responsibility to win over the left? Because everything that I've seen so far has been that the left should fall in line, and we didn't even get like 10 minutes. As soon as Bernie Sanders dropped out, immediately we were told to fall in line and lick that fucking boot and like it. So at what point is that responsibility at all going to be shared with Joe Biden? Like, do they share 50% of the responsibility? Hell, do they share 30%? 10%? Do they have any responsibility to actually win over voters and earn those votes? Any responsibility whatsoever? I'm genuinely asking. Because time and again, the Democratic Party establishment has given voters the middle finger. They've told us to go fuck ourselves.
Fuck
They said that they don't do that time and again.
Fuck John Smith.
And all of a sudden,
fuck most
we
Americans.
share all of the responsibility. None of the credit if Joe Biden's elected, all of the blame if he loses, but also in terms of just putting in work, that's on us. It's not on Joe Biden. Do you understand why people are so disillusioned with politics? Because things like this go on. Things like this happen frequently. Joe Biden and the Democratic Party establishment, they have all of the power. So why are you directing your rage to Bernie Sanders supporters, especially when we see things like this? Like in a reasonable world, you would see Joe Biden being universally condemned by, neoliberals, Democratic Party loyalists, who should theoretically be outraged that something like this is happening. They should be saying, Joe, what are you doing? I support you, but this doesn't help us to win anyone over. But this just gets ignored. And the conversation continues to be, how dare you even consider voting third party? Fuck out of here. I've got no time.
Exactly. So this video is about to end. What I'm going to say is, if you want to have power, what you do is you do not endorse Joe Biden. You refuse to endorse Joe Biden until you get a ton of concessions from Joe Biden. And then even then you consider not voting for him. That is your power. By not immediately endorsing Joe Biden or not even endorsing him until well after the nomination. And right now, Bernie Sanders should unendorse Joe Biden. Get back in the campaign. His campaign's already fighting to keep him on the ballot in New York. You should fight too. You could still vote for Bernie Sanders, and all the other 50% of this country that didn't get to vote, or 50% of the states, vote for Bernie Sanders. Make sure everybody knows you voted. Take pictures of it. We should have the government make sure that there's a way to verify it through mail, and be safe. Thanks for joining me.